What's up everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great and you're following the 3 H's of the channel. This is another episode of TheLeaf podcast, which means that we all made it to Friday again. And in this episode, I have some pretty interesting things to talk about. Well, I think they're interesting anyways. So last week I spoke about explorers having encounters with what could be dinosaurs or lizard-like cryptids or things like that. In this one, I have some encounters with explorers and giants. Now, of course, a lot of these are second-hand stories, that meaning that the explorers went to, say, Peru, and these stories are what the natives there told them. But of course, that's not all we're going to talk about. I also have an article that says that police in Canada, my country, have retrieved wreckage of a downed Octagonal UFO. Or was it a weather balloon? We'll talk about it later. And aside from that, sometime in this episode, I will answer a few questions that I frequently see in the comments below. Some of them are funny, and some of them I just figured that people would like to know. And as usual, any article that I use will be down in the description below. So to start us off is a definite strange one from the 16th century or the 1500s. A Spanish conquistador named Pedro Cieza de Leon wrote a book called Royal Commentaries of the Incas, Volume 1. He wrote about that the natives of the region told them and his men about giants that came to their lands on crude rafts and landed in the peninsula of Santa Elena. And after landing, they set up camps and dug extremely deep wells for water. And this is what he said about them. Some were so big that an ordinary man of good size scarcely reached up to their knees. Their members were in proportion to the size of their bodies, and it was a monstrous thing to see their enormous heads and their hair hanging down about their shoulders. Their eyes were as large as small plates. They say they had no beards. Some of them were clad in the skins of animals, and others only in the dress that nature gave them. There were no women with them. On reaching this point, they set up their camp like a village, and even in these times there is a memory of the site of their houses. As they found no supply of water, they remedied the lack by making some very deep wells, a labor certainly worthy of record. Being undertaken by such strong men as these must have been to judge their size. They dug these wells in the living rock until they came to the water, and afterwards they built the wells in stone from the waterline upwards, so that they would last for ages. In these wells, the water is excellent, and it is always so cold that it is very pleasant to drink. However, things didn't exactly stay peaceful with these giants. Apparently, shortly after they arrived, they went on a bloodthirsty rampage. They raided villages. They ate everything they could get their hands on, including humans. And since they were so big, the tribes and villagers couldn't really do anything in retaliation to this, so the giants stayed. They built big houses, they hunted, fished, and marauded through the villages whenever they really felt like it. However, the tribespeople told the story that when things got really bad, a bright and shining angel drove them away. Now the conquistador believed this. He thought the stories were real because he had seen the wreckage of the houses and these wells for himself. He said, "This is the account they gave of the giants, and we believe that it happened, for it is said that very large bones have been found and still are found thereabouts, and I have heard Spaniards say they have seen pieces of teeth which they thought must have weighed half a pound when whole, and also seen a piece of a shin bone of a wonderful size, all of which bears witness to the truth of the incident. In addition to this, one can see the places where the sites of their villages were, and also the wells or cisterns that they made. I cannot state whence or how these giants came there. In the present year of 1550, when in the city of Lima, I had heard that when His Excellency Don Antonio de Mendoza was viceroy and the governor of New Spain, certain bones of men as big as these giants, and even bigger, were found there. I have heard too that in an ancient sepulchre in the city of Mexico or somewhere else in that kingdom, certain bones of giants have been found. Since so many people saw them and attest having done so, it can therefore be credited that such giants did exist, and indeed they may have been all of the same race. So the very first thing that comes to mind is when they said that they were all men and there were no women with them. Was this contingency of giants, were they some kind of exploratory force themselves, or were they the last of a dying civilization or a dying species? The other thing, of course, that it reminds me of is the Nephilim, especially when it's stated that they were eating other humans and kind of going crazy, almost like a bloodlust. And it kind of made me think of it even more when they said that an angel showed up out of the sky. But what do you think? Do you think that they're Nephilim, or do you think that they were just giants? Because it is possible that they were just giants. It's not in the realm of accepted things, but there are tons and tons and tons of stories about giants all throughout history, on almost every continent too. There's even the red-haired giants in New Zealand and Australia. And I know that in this case that these giants went like bloodthirsty and started killing people, but that's not always the case with these stories. I have one here. It's an article from CBC, which is Canada's state broadcaster, the Canadian Broadcast Corporation. On their website they have an article from 2017, which ironically I had bookmarked from 2017, and I had just found it the other day. But in this case, it talks about a giant, but he was a hero. In fact, this hero would fight other giant beasts, and it really depends on the tribe, but in some cases it's a giant Wolverine type creature, in some ones it's a giant beaver type creature, and I think there's even one where it's like something that, if you were to draw it today, it would kind of come out looking like a hairy dinosaur almost. But that last one isn't mentioned here. I just remember reading that a long time ago. So this hero, like I said, is also known as a warrior and known by many names, especially a traveler. The Dene people call him Yamoria. The Dene of South Slavey call him Zambia Deja. I think I'm saying that right. And of course, the Gwich'in call him Atachukai, which I definitely know that I'm not pronouncing right, but there's not really a reference here. But the spelling is Atachuukai. So the names vary, and his exploits are generally always the same. But it's also interesting to note that while they called them giant wolverines and giant beavers, it's said that these are not actually what these creatures were. They were spirit animals. They seem to be able to appear kind of how they want. And the quote here says that they have inhabited the land since the earliest days. In fact, in one story, the hero encountered a man-eating version of one of these spirits at modern-day Fort Yukon. It said that he chased him all the way across the land up the Mackenzie River and drove the creature out. Now, what's interesting to mention about this specific river is that there are several lakes leading up to the river, and these lakes were said to be made by this beast's thunderous footsteps that made indentations in the ground, creating 6 lakes. And of course, I'll post the pictures that they provide in the article of some of these lakes. One of them really does look like a giant dinosaur footprint or a Godzilla footprint, depending on how you look at it. And then there's another picture of 2 other lakes that 100% look like human footprints. It's crazy. So basically, from the far reaches of the Northwest Territories in Canada all the way down to Peru, there's all these stories about giants. And of course, we could talk all day about what we think happened to them. I know that some theories are the Great Flood, another extinction event, and in some cases, they just died off. Which one do you think it was? Or maybe you think it's something that I missed here, besides a flood, another extinction event, and just dying off. Because like I said, in the first encounter in Peru, it was all men, there were no women. You can't exactly sustain a civilization without women. This is why I kind of wonder if they were traveling there to escape something, Were they coming from their homeland that had been trashed? Were they simply an exploratory force, or expeditionary force, I guess is the right word? Or were they the remnants of a previous global civilization where there was just none left, and they were going there to hopefully find more of their kind, but instead found humans? Of course, they are mentioned in the Book of Enoch, which is one of the more spicy books of the Bible that is not traditionally included. And hearing about giants, what it also makes me think of is they were called the Anunnaki, I think. And if you've been on the internet as long as I have, you remember in like 2009 when there were all those videos going around about the Nibiru planet, I think it was called, and that the planet had an abstract orbit with Earth, and that it was coming back around again, and it was gonna be somewhere in Jupiter's belt or something like that. I think by now they said that we were all going to be dead anyways, so clearly that didn't happen. That's a bit of a sidetrack for a different day, but where I was going with it was that they said that these giants were from there, and that they had come to the Earth for gold, essentially because something about their spaceships ran on gold. If anybody else remembers seeing those videos from back then, let me know down in the comments, because they kind of sound like a fever dream the more I talk about them. But if anything, that's kind of what this is for, to me ramble on about things, I guess. But anyways, I have another encounter here, or another story, from 1543. A Captain Juan Olmos supposedly was part of an excavation in the Trujillo Valley. Supposedly he found various bones from extremely large individuals. Some of them would be taller than 10 feet. There was also a giant skeleton found in the province of Tucumán and Tarija. In fact, these encounters, or these sightings of these giant bones, continued from the 15th century all the way to the 17th century. A missionary and Jesuit priest, Pablo José Arriaga, wrote of a curious finding in his 1,620-page manuscript, The Extirpation of Idolatry in Peru. He says this: "They took us to the other side of the village, about a quarter of a league, which where a very large cave was, and in it many dead Gentiles. Among them were 3 bodies of giants with deformed heads, elongated skulls, dressed in ceremonial cloth, but rotted with time. These giants are the progenitors of all of this people, whom they worshipped and revered. There were many traces of human sacrifice. They, the inspectors, burned the bodies in the village." So one thing that is kind of sad here is that a lot of these bodies or supposed bones are either lost to time, have been stolen, or are in some warehouse somewheres that will never see the light of day, unfortunately. As for these giants being revered or being like kings, I do remember another story that I read. It's actually a book, but I don't remember the title of it. It's something about god kings, and it gives a list of king names dating back about 437,000 years, something crazy like that, about all these crazy kingdoms and different events throughout human history where we were guided by these taller beings that were more intelligent. Whether that's true or not, we'll probably never know, at least not in this day and age. Which, if these kingdoms were so large and vast and spread all across the world, then, again, what happened to that small contingent that landed in Peru? It really kind of adds credence to the thought that maybe they were dying off, maybe they got corrupted, and something terrible happened. But of course, let me know what you think down in the comments. Do you think that there were giants, or do you think that it's all just kind of made up? Do you think that it's just something fantastical that the explorers brought back with them in some kind of attempt to justify the expenditures of their exploration? Let me know what you think. But, moving on, next up I said I had this story about police in Canada retrieving supposedly wreckage to an octagonal UFO. So far the Coast Guard and the RCMP are saying that it was a weather balloon, which of course is an oldie but a goodie explanation for anything that's kind of unknown in the sky. I kind of figure if it was a weather balloon, there's not much of a reason why a US F-16 fighter jet would hit it with 2 missiles. That is, unless it was some kind of spy craft. But over Lake Huron in Ontario, there were several sightings of an octagonal UFO, and then after that, they immediately began trying to locate the wreckage. This was with the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, that teamed up with the American and Canadian Coast Guards to get to the crash site. Now, at some point in the search, the weather had been called off due to some severe weather that came out of nowhere. But around 3 weeks later, they said they had collected some of the wreckage, or some of the material, they said, and they said they found a module with it. Now here's where it gets a little dicey, a little weird. The module isn't necessarily part of the same material that was shot down. This module is from a company that manufactures weather equipment, but the size of the craft that they said that they shot down and recovered is different from the size that was sighted of the UFO. And not only that, they won't say if what they shot at was the UFO, or if there was like a different weather balloon or spy craft over Lake Huron. I feel like it's a bit weird because why keep this under wraps? Why have this be declassified information? Now it's true that people could have just seen a weird looking weather balloon, called it in, and then it got shot down because maybe somewhere someone thought that it could have been a spy craft and it ended up being a weather balloon. This is all possible. I find it a little weird that they won't say if anything that's shot down has anything to do with the module, or if what they shot down was the same as what was sighted. Now I know that it's quite possible that maybe they're just not going to address events of people seeing UFOs. But the whole thing is kind of just a little bit weird. Maybe I've just been reading too much into it, it's hard to say. But that's just kind of what I think about it. I'll post the article down below, and you can tell me what you think about it. And before I go, here are a few questions that I frequently get that I figured I should answer. I'll continue to answer them if I get them again. I just figure I'll answer them right here too. So the first one is, what are the 3 H's? The 3 H's are happy, healthy, and hydrated. The way I see it is that usually you can at least do one of them. If you're not really healthy, you can still be hydrated or happy. Or if you're happy, you may not be healthy, but you can still be hydrated. But I've for sure had days where I'm none of those 3 things, but they are things that I try to abide by. The next one is, where did I get the channel name, TheLeaf? So I know some people are going to think it's like a weed leaf, like marijuana, but actually it's because when I was thinking about making a YouTube channel, I thought, I should have a name that's kind of like me. And I just happened to be thinking about this when I was outside one day, and in the yard I noticed that we have a flagpole with a Canadian flag on it. And I thought, hey, TheLeaf. And that's a lot more mundane than some other channel names, but that's kind of how it came to me. And the other one is, this one I frequently get, why do I talk so weird? Which is very funny to me, because I know that I talk weird. I know I have a strange accent, or just a maritime accent. But I'm Canadian, so there's 1. I live in the Maritimes, there's 2. And I live in a French-English province, so there's 3. So you're not going to be able to escape all 3 of those things and just talk normal, as a lot of people would like you to. The other thing is that I say words weird sometimes because I've only read them, and that's the only reference I have for how to say it. Another one is that when I was really young, I had a speech impediment, so I had to learn how to say words a little bit differently, or how to approach words a little bit differently, and that's kind of comes out sometimes whenever I speak as well. And I hope that answers that question, because I figure living where I live, in the country I live, in the province I live, and where I live in general would be would be a lot of an answer as to why I talk a little weird. And the other question I get is, am I ever going to show my face on videos in the channel, on the channel, on videos? You get what I mean. And I don't know. I don't have a camera or a high quality camera, but if that's something that you guys want me to do, then in the future I could show my face on camera while I'm telling the stories. I kind of thought that it'd be a little weird having just me in the corner with like the B-roll footage and stuff. But if that's something you guys want, then feel free to let me know down in the comments. And with that, I thank you for listening to this episode of the Leaf Podcast. And if you would like to donate to the channel, you can do so at the links in the description, the PayPal, the Patreon, and Super Thanks here on YouTube. And if you would like to send in a story, there's an email down there as well. And I thank you for pulling up a stump, as always, and I will see you on Sunday. And yeah, have a good weekend. See you then.